Nice run and a good one. Williams outside. 15 keeps his feet. And Williams finds the end zone. And he is in for a touchdown. On second down, here's a toss. Here is Lucas. Jalen Lucas, that great speed. Keeps his feet. Inside the 30. Lucas, 10, 5. Touchdown, Indiana. It's Henderson cutting back and finding the end zone. Touchdown, Indiana.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 190, 10 away from 200 of the Hoosier Happy Hour presented by Big Banter. If you're not familiar with Big Banter is a network of Big Ten podcasts covering football, basketball, and we have everyone in the Big Ten, and we have USC and Oregon. So if you're a Washington podcast, somehow listening to an IU podcast, come on down. Same with UCLA. I'm still looking to fill those roles, but we're full swing into basketball season, but football never sleeps. I'm your host, Brandon Dubich. You can find me at Brandon Dubich on Twitter. And we got a fun episode for you today. Last week, you heard Michael and Seth talking about the state of the union in regards to IU and the Big Ten. So Mike's in Hawaii, Seth's in Jamaica. I'm here in Indiana talking to our buddy Newman. He does a football pick'em with me in college every Saturday. You can check us out on the Memery. We're bringing back Sports Cap Radio, but Newman, one name like Cher, is going to give us kind of an outside perspective. He is a Florida State fan living in ACC and SEC country. Newman, welcome to the pod.
Happy to be here. How's it going, Brandon?
I don't know. When the football program stock's higher than the basketball program stock, probably not great.
I mean, that's pretty typical for us in our parts.
For sure. Before we get into kind of the state of the union in the Big Ten from the Newman perspective, I got some housekeeping that Michael will kill me if I don't cover. Guys, fire sale. Everyone and their mother is putting stuff on sale. Call it a semi-annual, call it a flash sale. We're doing the same thing. Shirts are $10. All of the LEO shirts, $10. You get a free LEO sticker. So jump on to the LEO website. I'm not sure if Michael has Hoosier Happy Hour yet, but the link will be in the notes. Follow us on Twitter and Instagram. That's at Happy Hour IUFB. We'll have the link in the bio. Last and not least, this interview will not be on Patreon, but we do have a Patreon, which is $3 a month. We plan on having potentially next year's quarterback, definitely some IU coaches. You can get that content for $3 a month on our Patreon, and you also get 20% discount on merch as soon as we get rid of our current merch. So that's all the housekeeping. Let's get into stuff you guys want to hear about, and that's state of the Big Ten. Before we get into the outline, Newman, give me your general thoughts on kind of the new Big Ten, the schools that were added.
So in terms of the schools that were added, I think that the Big Ten did a pretty good job of grabbing some pretty valuable properties in Oregon, obviously, with their big branding and Nike money and all that stuff. And then USC and UCLA, the two big California schools that give you, the Rose Bowl, then give you just some really good properties in terms of championship caliber programs. Obviously, UCLA has won tons and tons of championships across all sports. Not so great in football recently, but USC obviously has been the dominant program in the Pac-12 or Pac-10. Pac-8, whatever pack they've been up
Pac-4 until recently.
Yeah, up until joining the Big Ten here. So, some very valuable properties and some good ads. And then obviously Washington, previously having won national championships, generally competitive in all your sports, a good recruiting area in general. And they just played in the national championship game. So, the Big Ten got to say that, these are basically both Big Ten teams here. And that's always good for the brand.
How does that, the addition of those 4 teams, because I think you nailed it. I think it does raise the profile. It makes it coast to coast. I think I can't see any negatives. How do you think adding those 4 schools, do you think that helps a program like IU, like Purdue, like Maryland?
It helps in the sense that it will bring more eyeballs to the Big Ten, and that means bigger paychecks for all of the members. It hurts in terms of being competitive, especially on the football land front, because now you've added 4 teams that are definitely slotting ahead of you. So that's, just generally we're going to look at it. Is there a possibility that Indiana could at some point, overtake one of those schools or all those schools, win a Big Ten title? Theoretically, but it's not very likely. But in general, the money absolutely helps. The exposure to the West Coast will help you with recruiting. So yeah, there's definitely some benefits and can improve the stock of the program in general. I'm sure most of you Indiana fans, kind of like Kentucky, would be very happy if you winning, 7-8 games every year, getting to go to a bowl game, hopefully in some place warm. And, it gives you something to do during the fall while you're waiting for basketball season.
Yeah, no, I think you nailed it there too. It, for me, what I've always said is it may lower the ceiling of a team like IU, right? Like IU was never going to win a Big Ten when it was just Ohio State, Penn State, Michigan. Now it's really never going to win the Big Ten when you add the likes of Washington, Oregon, and USC. But I think it raises the floor because, one, the schedule is going to get a lot lighter. Again, the Big Ten East, in my mind, was the toughest division in football. So your year-to-year schedule is going to get easier.
And SEC West may beg to differ, but
of course they would. Of course they would. But yeah, I think playing an easier schedule and then more money, better recruits, more exposure, all the things you nailed upon. So sounds like we're kind of on the same page as the new Big Ten slates for IU. Let's jump outside of IU just for a quick minute. What did you think of Michigan in 2023? The Big Ten got a rap for not winning a national championship for a long time. Do you think this last season Big Ten was Michigan was a good representation of the Big Ten? And do you think Big Ten kind of shook their rap, I guess?
So I think that Michigan making it to the national championship and winning a national championship is obviously very good for the Big Ten. They did it in a very Big Ten style. Michigan played, really sound defense. They pounded the rock at a high level. They didn't really throw the ball. In fact, there was games where J.J. McCarthy had, one pass in the second half of a game that they won. So yeah, they did it in a very Michigan brand, Big Ten brand style of way. They, didn't recruit at the top level of college football. They didn't ever overtake Ohio State in that. They developed. So that's that says a lot for that style of winning. So in general, I think that that's all good for the Big Ten. Obviously, you get the national championship, you get the paycheck from making it to the college football playoff, and the bump that you get for the conference in that respect. And then in terms of Michigan, Michigan finally did it, right? They knocked off Ohio State multiple years. And then they finally got over the hump and won a national championship, the first one since a shared national championship in 1997 with Nebraska, back in your, Tom Brady / Brian Griese years,
right?
With Charles Woodson winning the Heisman, the last defensive player to win it still. So yeah, it's been a while. That's well over 20 years ago, and it was overdue for Michigan. So now it gives all of the Michigan fans a lot of that they can brag about, which is bad for everyone else because they tend to be some of the uppitiest of fan bases. Sure. So yeah. But that all being said, now having lost Jim Harbaugh and a lot of the players that were on that staff, plus the COVID year, we're losing most of the COVID super seniors. It's going to be a little bit different sledding throughout the course, and we'll see how it impacts college football. But with realignment and the expansion of the college football playoff and some of the big guns leaving the college football space in terms of coaching, I think it's going to spread out some of the talent.
For sure.
And that could make it more interesting in general for college football fans on the whole. So I'm looking forward to the future here.
Oh man, Ohio State is just eating Michigan's recruits. Florida State can say the same thing about Alabama recruits. I think a flattening is a great word for what's kind of happening across the country right now. As my listeners know, we have a section called Brando's Randos. Sometimes I get too excited and I ask a question early, which is I'm going to do here because you brought up Michigan's fan base. So what would be the Michigan fan base of the ACC or the SEC?
I would say Duke is probably your best bet in regards to that in terms of being uppity, because they, not necessarily college football wise, but just they look down upon everyone else. That's kind of just the way they are. Because, Duke being a private school and all that stuff. So I would say that in regards to just being uppity and looking down on them, fan bases, it's very much so Duke. Not that we encounter a ton of Duke fans where I live, or at least actual Duke alums. But that's probably the answer that I'd go with. If you wanted it in respect of like teams that are actually successful in football, I don't know that's really
so like Ohio State and Florida, I think are pretty similar, right? Kind of more. I'm gonna offend the Ohio State and Florida fans, but I don't care. Kind of more of a Walmart based attendance or fan base. A lot of not alumni. You don't see that much from
Florida's
Michigan.
not in the ACC. They're in the SEC though.
Right,
so,
right.
But if we're just going regionally in terms of like, I like to look at Florida, like the state of Florida as, it's pretty much split into, there's the big three, right? You have your Miami and your Florida and your Florida State, and Florida likes to look down on Florida State as the younger brother because Florida State started playing football like 50 years later, even though they've had way more success over that time frame that they've been playing football than Florida had. In fact, they won their national championship before Florida ever did. And they've won the same amount of national championships and Heisman. So I don't know that Florida should be bragging about much at this point.
They're down bad.
Florida's
down bad.
Miami had a stretch in, the late 80s and early 90s where they won 5 national championships in a row. So that kind of vaults them into that conversation. The thing is, there's lots of Miami fans down here because of the thuggery that is the U and all this stuff that they did with that. And that gained them a lot of popularity, and that still rides to some degree. However, most people in the state of Florida that are Miami fans did not go to Miami. So there's that. And
the Big Ten doesn't really have a Miami equivalent, like a little, like Penn State with like their 80s and 90s, early 2000s success. But that's about it, where Penn State and Miami kind of compare.
I think Duke compares to Miami if you're looking at the state of North Carolina and the state of Florida, right? So like UNC is very much so similar to Florida, and then they look down upon NC State, and then NC State is, more Florida State, the look down upon school that's also in it, except for Florida State's significantly more successful than NC State is across the board. So but Duke and Miami shared like we're private school, and we, had our runs of success a long time ago. Although Duke is, they're still riding some of that success. So.
Yeah, when 15-year-old Brandon, when he still wanted to be a sports broadcaster, I was going to go to Miami. I wanted nothing to do with Syracuse. I wanted to go to Miami as media school. And then I decided against that. But let's get back to the Big Ten, and let's talk about Penn State, specifically Drew Allar here, or Aller. Is it Allar or Aller?
I always thought it was Aller, but I'm not sure.
Right. So give me your thoughts on him. Can he vault Penn State into the playoff next year? And they recently hired Tom Allen, IU's previous head coach, as their defensive coordinator. Kind of give an outside opinion on the QB and Penn State in general.
Yeah, they also hired Kansas's offensive coordinator. I think it's Kolnicki. To be their offense coordinator.
I missed that one.
Replacing Mike Yurcich. I remember actually Marcus and I attended the Duke Florida State game during the season, and I had said we were kind of following along what was going on with that Ohio State Penn State. That was the same weekend, and I was like, this is before they even lost to Michigan. I was like, well, listen, if you're Penn State and your offense isn't able to do enough when your defense is pitching an absolute shutout against Ohio State to get you over the hump, then this is not your offensive coordinator of the future. You need to get rid of him basically right now. Yeah. And I mean, although they waited till the end of the season, they did come to the same conclusion. If not now, then when? They're definitely going to need to improve the talent at the wide receiver position. I think that Drew Allar could be good. We haven't quite seen him step up in a big moment yet, right? Yeah. He was an elite prospect coming out and, has all of that stuff, but we haven't seen it in game. And until we do, I'm hesitant to say that he can do it. But, we saw something similar out of a guy like Joe Burrow, right? His first year as a starter at LSU, he didn't look like he was a guy that's ever going to amount to anything special. And then the next year takes this giant leap forward and boom. Now he's, a guy who's not only successful at the college level and had the historic season that he did, but he's also significantly successful in the NFL, having taken the team to the Super Bowl already, and just kind of annually being one of the guys that you talk about when you list your names of top quarterbacks, right?
Yep.
So, yeah. So Drew Allar definitely has all of the physical tools to get to that point.
Absolutely.
We'll see if the offense coordinator hire is good and helps him develop. Kolnicki has a track record of being very successful, especially if you look at what Kansas did. They ran kind of a little bit of a funky style of offense, but they actually played to win, and they took advantage of what their players could do well with Jalen Daniels and Jason Bean, keeping them in a lot of games, and then winning a lot of those games over the last couple of years that they've been there. So it's going to be interesting, but I think that they should really be attacking the portal at the wide receiver position, and I haven't seen them doing that to this point.
No. Let's kind of talk stocks here. Who wins more games in the next 5 seasons, Penn State or Michigan?
Ooh. Not knowing what the schedule is going to look like. I think Michigan's going to take a little bit of a step back this year.
Do too.
Right.
I do too.
Obviously, you're losing JJ McCarthy. That's a huge factor in that. I don't know who the quarterback is going to be next. I don't know if Michigan knows who the quarterback is going to be next. Orji is a guy who's dynamic. He can run around. He's kind of like a Jalen Milroe-esque player, but can he throw the ball? They're losing Roman Wilson. What are they looking at wide receiver wise? So it'll be interesting to see how the recruiting ticks there for Michigan. Obviously, you're losing a bunch of guys on the defensive end too, but they do keep, I think, two of their better defensive linemen. So their front should be decent at worst. And Michigan's going to be able to run the ball, and their offensive line is going to continue to be good. So you have some good aspects there. Penn State recruits right there up there with Michigan and all the other schools. They're above the blue chip ratio. Their problem is that they have a head coach in James Franklin who consistently mismanages games. In fact, I would dare to say that James Franklin is basically just a longer tenured Mario Cristobal. That's exactly what Mario Cristobal is. And the thing is, when you have an elite recruiter, you always have a chance. We look at a guy like Ed Orgeron, who's considered to be an elite recruiter, right? And what did he need to do? He just needed to find the right combination of coordinators, and then he gives them the clay, right? And they let the coordinators mold the clay, and then they have a chance at success. That's realistically Penn State's goal in terms of getting to national championship at this point, because James Franklin is not going to win you a game by giving you a margin as a head coach. So that being the case, he needs to hire good coordinators, and we've seen the cycle continue, right? They've hired, I think, 3 or 4 offense coordinators over the course of the last 6 years, I believe, including, I think they took the guy from Minnesota, right? And then he went back to Minnesota. They took Yurcich from, I think, Boston College or Maryland or something like that. And then
it was Maryland. It was Maryland.
And then now you bring in Kolnicki. So we'll see how he pans out defensively. I don't think that they would want to replace their defense coordinator, but Manny Diaz took the head coaching job at Duke, right? So now you have to bring in former head coach Tom Allen. We'll see what changes he makes to that defense. They have good players. They're going to lose some of the key guys. I think like Chop Robinson's gone, but they still have, I think, their best defensive players still sticking around because he has to. He was only a sophomore this year, but he'll be gone after next season. So in terms of who I think is going to win, going back to your question, circling back after all that, who I think is going to win more games over the course of the next 5 years, I would probably lean Penn State because they have the recruiting chops and stuff. And right now they have a quarterback, whereas we don't necessarily see the same out of Michigan. And I'll take, since projecting 5 years out is kind of hard to do anyway, I'll take the upfront wins and say that Penn State probably wins a few more games than Michigan, but probably not a lot more.
You and I were way off, by the way. You just came from Texas. He was the OC quarterback coach at Texas in 2020. I don't know if that was the year Herman got fired. I have no idea. I don't know why you would leave Texas to get a lateral job with Penn State, but I don't care enough to look it up.
Probably just paid him more.
Could be it. So, as kind of dovetailing this back into IU hosts Washington and Michigan at home. With those teams having new coaches, new rosters, does IU have any shot of upsetting either one of those teams in what I would call down years for both programs?
I would say they certainly have a chance to upset Washington. I don't think that, or it may not even be an upset by the time we get to that game. I don't know when they play. Because Washington loses a ton, right? Yep. They lose their 3 wide receivers to the NFL as well as their quarterback. They lose their their head coach. They lose their offense coordinator. They lose their recruiting analyst. And Jed Fish is coming in there, and he's not bringing, the quarterback that he wanted. So we're going to see what Rodgers can do. He's going to have to learn a new system, installing a new system with an entire new team, installing a new weight program, installing all that stuff. I think that that's going to be an issue for Washington. I don't know exactly where they would compare in terms of recruiting to Indiana at this point, but I know that Washington's recruiting was lagging even under Kalen DeBoer last year. There was questions about what they're going to do because they didn't seem to be capitalizing on the trail. And turns out it doesn't really matter in terms of Kalen DeBoer, but Washington is going to kind of eat some of that. They're just not, they didn't recruit at a very high level. They didn't capitalize on what they could have done. And I think that Indiana has actually done a decent job here in the portal in terms of getting a lot of good players. I'm sure you can and have gone into more detail on what the transfer portal recruiting class is looking like. And then I think Cignetti runs a pretty fun offense. He gets a lot out of his guys. It's a home game for you. Washington's traveling. I don't know how far it is, but it's not super close.
It's not close.
Yeah. So I would lean all the advantages towards Indiana, and I would say that there is a chance that they can pull that upset for sure. Michigan, on the other hand, I still think that their defense is going to be really good. It's going to keep them in a lot of games. I don't know what their offense is going to look like, but I'm sure it's going to involve a lot of running the ball. And especially if Orji is playing quarterback, it may involve a lot of quarterback run, which can be difficult on a defense. So
for sure.
I would not give you as much of a chance to win that game.
Of course. And everyone knows they throw up the stat, have beat Michigan once in the last 20 years. They like to say that a lot in the broadcasts.
Yeah.
Let's stick with Michigan, though. What did you think about the hire? It wasn't a surprise for me they stayed in-house. I don't know if it was the right decision. I think they should have maybe spread it out a little bit, let other coaches interview. But it was not surprising that they gave Moore the job.
I think based on the timing at which Harbaugh eventually made his decision, right? I think it's kind of a slam dunk to hire Sherrone Moore. He was the guy who'd been the interim coach during, several of the games when Harbaugh was suspended throughout the course of the year. So you got a good look, right? Michigan has information on this guy. They know exactly what he's bringing to the table. And if they like what they see and they like what they've experienced to this point, it's a natural move to maintain continuity with the recruiting class and the players that are already there, right? If you bring in somebody from the outside, the studs that I was talking about on the defensive line, maybe they skip town too, right? So you don't know exactly what's going to happen. And I don't know that at this point in the hiring cycle that you really want to be looking for a head coach. So it's like, who are you going to go get? A lot of the good candidates have already taken jobs, and that's why you don't have maybe as many options available to you.
Yeah, again, it made sense to me. Yeah. I would have cast a bigger net, but it made all the sense in the world. It was not a surprise to anyone in Big Ten
Here
country.
Is the thing. You can then, if Sharon Moore is not successful, and in 2.5 years or whatever, 3 years, you're looking at and you're like, we've seen a significant dip and the program is not heading in the right direction. We can change course, and we can say, well, listen, the AD can pawn it off. Instead of getting fired, he can say, we won a national championship. We lost our head coach. We went with the next guy up. He isn't the guy, but at that point in time, it made the most sense to do it. I should still be able to hire another head coach. So for job preservation, sir, this is, it's the correct move out of the AD. Whereas if he hires a guy and that guy from off the street, that guy doesn't do well, and let's say Sharon Moore goes into more success, guess who's getting canned?
Yep.
So yeah, job preservation, it's the correct hire.
For sure. Let's go to a coach that gets talked about a lot on this pod. I won't spoil what we say because I want to get your reaction first. But speaking of coaches in the Big Ten, give me your thoughts on Luke Fickell.
I thought you were gonna go Ryan Day first.
No. That's a pretty easy one.
It's right here on the outline. So
yeah, but you got to realize when my outline, I jump around like crazy, which makes it tough for every single guest. But it's my show. I'm gonna do what I want. So Luke Fickell does a 180 at Wisconsin the way they want to play the game. I think by Wisconsin standards, they had a down year. What are your thoughts on Luke Fickell at Wisconsin?
So I think that Luke Fickell does a lot of things well. We've seen what he did at Cincinnati, where he took a program that was, having a dip in production from the, with the highs that they did have, right? They have, Jason Kelsey and Travis Kelsey there, and they were pretty damn successful under guys like Brian Kelly and Butch Jones. And then they went and hired, what's his name? The former Auburn coach that was at Texas Tech. Ran for Senate. I'm blanking on his name. But he turned out to be a colossal failure, right? So, you saw that dip and then you had to build the program back up, which Luke Fickell did and took him to highs that they've never been to before, right? Competing in the college football playoff. How he did that was by recruiting a lot and recruiting their type of players. I think he knows what he wants in terms of recruiting. And I think that Wisconsin program is willing to invest in it. So I think that if Luke Fickell's not successful there at Wisconsin, it'll be because of a couple things. Something just goes bad, or they never really find a quarterback. Either one of those could absolutely sink them, but they're definitely throwing a lot of chips at different quarterbacks to see who's going to be the guy. Besides Tanner Mordecai, they also brought in Arnold, I believe, or something from Oklahoma, who, was a guy who needed a little bit more time, but eventually they thought could be successful there. And I think that he'll also, recruit some of his different quarterbacks. They found a quarterback in Desmond Ridder, and that leads you to success there. That's one of those things with college football. It kind of is a little bit of the great equalizer, is if you can find a special quarterback, right? We saw that with Indiana when they had a guy by the name of Michael Penix playing.
Remember him?
They had a little bit more success than you would normally see, right? It didn't matter that Ohio State out-recruited the hell out of them. They were in there in that game. So that's what you'll see when you have a special quarterback. And for programs that are not necessarily recruiting at the very upper echelon, you absolutely have to find that difference maker at the quarterback position. And that will determine whether or not Luke Fickell is successful. In general, I would bet on him getting that program back up to the level that they expect, 10-ish wins a season. And then we will see what happens in those other couple games that maybe make the difference.
See, that's why I'm having you on, because we think Luke Fickell is going to crash and burn. Outside of Ohio, because I think you did nail it. I think if he can get his quarterback, his system is going to work without a doubt. But outside of Ohio State, I think the Big Ten's biggest critique is there hasn't been a quarterback. I mean, outside of Michael Penix and now JJ McCarthy, like Sean Clifford was just a guy. Tua's brother, just a guy. Like there hasn't been a standout Big Ten quarterback, and Luke Fickell needs that, right?
What about Graham Mertz?
Right, exactly. Don't get me started on Peyton Thorne. So I mean, I think your analysis hit. But I think you could point to a couple others, or like going back to Michigan State. I think that they actually had some success there, right? Brian Hoyer, Kirby
Kirk Cousins, they had some successful years there. Even if you look at Iowa, when Iowa was most successful, when they had, those undefeated seasons and stuff, they had a guy at quarterback, Brad Banks, Jim Sorgi, guys like that, have littered the Big Ten and been productive players at a lot of schools.
Yeah. We'll see. We'll resurface this in a few years and see.
Purdue had a guy that was pretty good. A couple, Aiden O'Connell was pretty good for them last year, and he's playing in the NFL. So he produced a pretty good season out of Purdue. Where did Purdue finish last year when Aiden O'Connell was there? They win the Big Ten.
They won the Big Ten West, and then actually made it a game against C.J. Stroud in Ohio State. That was a surprisingly close game.
Yeah, and then you can go back in time to a guy by the name of Drew Brees at Purdue, who was pretty successful too. So, special quarterbacks, they can raise the level of the entire team.
Yeah, so let's just jump to Ohio State, and Michael's not on, so because he would puke. I think Ohio State is going to be top 3 team in the country next year. I think they are going to be really, really good. So everyone wants to talk about Ryan Day. I don't think his seat is hot. What do you think, kind of being outside of the Big Ten? And have you noticed what Ohio State's been doing in the recruiting world?
Yeah, I mean, they've absolutely gone out and gotten all of the transfer portal recruits that they can get. Yeah. I don't remember who exactly. Do you know who they landed at quarterback, though?
Our dude from Kansas State, Howard.
Oh, yeah, that's right. They got him to flip from USC. Yeah. He's good. I don't know that he's great, but he doesn't have to be at Ohio State because they're just absolutely loaded. So this seems like it's one of those years where they're pushing all the chips into the table.
Yep.
And because of that, it is definitely, I expect Ohio State to be in it. I expect them to win the Big Ten. I expect them to go undefeated or maybe suffer only one loss throughout the course of the season, and then play in the Big Ten championship game, win that game, and go to the college football playoff. Those are the expectations for Ohio State. If somehow Ohio State does not make it to the college football playoff, even if they don't win the Big Ten, I think that could point to real issues for Ryan Day. I don't expect that. I expect Ohio State, being as loaded as they are, unless they suffer some massive injuries, defined at a couple, concentrated at positions, then they should be just fine, and they should be able to, at minimum, make the playoff, even if they do not win the Big Ten.
So their schedule, they're out of conferences: Akron, Western Michigan, and Marshall.
Okay, they better not lose any of those.
Their only tough games, in my opinion, is at Oregon and at Penn State.
At Oregon's going to be tough. Who's Oregon's quarterback?
That's early October,
Gabriel, right? So yeah, I mean, it's been they've lost previously going into Oregon, so that'll be a fight. Dan Lanning, I think, can really coach, and he's got that program heading in a good direction. I don't think that they're losing a lot to the NFL outside of Bo Nix and I think one of their receivers.
Both teams should be undefeated going into week 7. So that'll probably be a night game.
Good chance to be game day, if not game day, big noon Saturday.
Yeah.
Right.
They wouldn't put a West Coast team on a big noon, right? Not at 9 a.m. local time. That's insane. They could. I don't know. It's money. It is Fox. Nothing has to make sense. But yeah, well, that's a week 7 battle. That should be absolutely just amazing.
Yeah.
But yeah, no, I think they're going to be absolutely loaded. Let's jump real quick on some other hires. Your thoughts on Jonathan Smith at MSU? It's been crushed here in Big Ten country, but I know you liked it when we originally talked about it.
I mean, I'm really high on Jonathan Smith. I think he's an excellent coach. I think that if you look at what he did at Oregon State is a very difficult place to win, very difficult. And he got them to the point where they're winning 10 plus games, competing for the Pac-12 title to some degree, and knocking off some of the biggest brands in that conference. He understands what it's like to play for or to coach for the little school brother in your own state, right? At Oregon State in Oregon and Michigan State in Michigan. So, but the thing, and he gives you a little bit of a scheme advantage. He does things fourth down percentages, stuff like that to win the games. I talked about this with Trevor, and I think our buddy Trevor. He said that he didn't like him, and he was like, "Oh, they've never had a defense." And I was like, "Well, they had a top 20 defense last year, so that's pretty damn good."
Yeah.
At Oregon State, where they're not exactly loaded with recruits, so he's going to find a way. That's kind of what he does. I think it's a good hire for Michigan State. That's a program that has expectations to compete for Big Ten titles, but I don't necessarily know that they're going to be able to get over the hump unless they also find a special quarterback. I see them similarly. I see Wisconsin, but I love the hire of Jonathan Smith. I think it's a really good hire for Michigan State. I don't think that there was a lot of better coaches that they were going to find to take that job.
Yeah. All right. So just because let's do quick grades, right? More at Michigan.
B plus.
Fish at Washington.
I think that's a B.
Jonathan Smith at MSU.
I think that's a B plus.
Signetti at IU.
I think that's a B plus.
B plus. All right. So let's go into a little bit to shift gears here to IU before we let you talk about Florida State. That wouldn't be fair on my part if we didn't let you talk about Florida State, but let's talk about IU first. First, I want to talk big picture. How does a school like Indiana University succeed in modern day college football?
So I think that is very dependent on how we measure success, right? I mentioned if I was Indiana, I would be aiming for what Kentucky's football program is doing in terms of
that is not going to make a lot of people who listen happy, but I get what you're saying at a 30,000 foot level.
Indiana is a basketball school. Everybody knows this. They've never competed for national championships in football. And they've been playing football for a long time, a lot longer than even Florida State has. But they're in an area where they're just never going to get the elite of elite recruits. That's not what they have unless, Mark Cuban actually starts pumping in millions of dollars to that football program so that they can buy the best recruits. That's probably not going to happen, right? And the thing is, Mark Cuban has lots of products that he can help pitch for if he wants to get some NIL deals to these players in terms of all of his Shark Tank investments. So it's not like it's not there. But if you're looking at Indiana from what a realistic point of view, winning 8 games a year at Indiana, if you guys could win 8 games a year, you get to go to a bowl game, that's success to me. And then maybe in a special year where you have a bunch of senior heavy team, and you've got a little bit more of a special quarterback, is there a chance that you could, pull some upsets and find a way to win a Big Ten championship? Yes. But that's what you should be gunning for, not we're going to win the national championship. We're going to win the Big Ten every year. That's not realistic at a place like Indiana. And anyone who thinks so is delusional, who thinks otherwise is delusional in that respect.
No, spot on. I don't even so that's funny because you probably don't see a lot of Indiana marketing. But 9-win Indiana has been something that the Twitterverse has been trying to will into existence. 8 wins is all we want. It's really funny that you landed on that number because 9-win Indiana has been going around the circuits for a few years. And I'll admit, when they made back-to-back bowls in Florida, that was a ton of fun. Losing to Tennessee and Ole Miss wasn't great, especially the way they lost to both schools. Wasn't great, but yeah, I think you're spot on with what success is. So how do they get that?
Well,
how does Indiana?
One more thing in regards to that, like we talked about Kentucky. Kentucky was, has gotten to the point where they're on the precipice of winning their division. That'd be a first for Kentucky to win the SEC East. They're doing away with division, so that's not a possibility anymore. But making the conference championship game, if you're Indiana, that's a great success. And Kentucky's gotten to the point where they're pretty close. The other thing Kentucky's done, they've had multiple 10-win seasons. 10-win seasons.
That's crazy.
Under Stoops there. So if you're telling me Indiana doesn't want 10-win seasons, like that's not good enough for them, then I don't know how else to break it to you people, but
what do you mean, you people?
You Indiana fans.
Of course. So how does IU do it? It's basketball NIL is top 5 in the country.
Yeah.
It just is. I believe Indiana football can get to top 25 NIL, but people aren't going to spend until they see it. Right. Yeah. I think that's I think it's a big reason that they hired Cignetti, because he wants to win now. He's 62 years old. He's not looking to get a bunch of freshmen and sophomores and develop them. He brought in 27 seniors or super seniors. He wants to win next year. And I think that's a really good level, because IU has a huge fan base. There just has never been a reason to buy in. So I mean, IU football is never going to be top 5, top 10, maybe not even top 20, but I think it can be 25 to 30 in NIL. And if you're 25 to 30 in on NIL, I think you can be a top 25, top to 30 team, right?
Yeah, I think that is true. If I was Indiana, how I would go about trying to, optimize getting to the point of success if you're Cignetti, I think that the transfer portal is definitely a place where you're going to have to live, right? You need to be recruiting, any good transfers that you can find, upper level players or quality players that are playing maybe at lower programs, MAC programs, and any of those like P5 or P6 now conferences that you have with the Pac-12 kind of joining that, or whatever's going to happen out there. I think that you take from those schools, absolutely, if you can. And then you also hit the JUCO market, right? Like the JUCO, obviously Indiana's pretty close to Iowa. Iowa has some of the top programs that you're going to see. Kansas has some of the top programs that you're going to see. So you need to be, heavily invested in those JUCO programs. And then you still need to find a way. So the first couple of years, absolutely, transfer classes are definitely going to be the way to go. Establish, win, find a way to win 7 games next year, or make a bowl game. You know what I mean? Get some of the fans' investment, get some of the backing of, everyone. Maybe even if you have a special quarterback, you can win a few more. And then show proof of concept on the field. This is kind of what Mike Norvell did. There was some talk of Mike Norvell, can he recruit coming into this past season, because he hadn't really done it at the, they were living in the 18-20 range in recruiting at Florida State, which is, for Florida State, just not going to cut it. But what he was doing was he was hammering the portal. They were finding players that were undervalued by, the ranking services, guys who, like Jared Verse, who hit growth spurts when they were in college, and just became super studs, or guys that they, evaluated as being above average prospects. And then they developed them. Jordan Travis had trouble throwing against air at certain points when he was, when Mike Norvell first showed up to campus, and he turned him into a Heisman candidate. So they did a really good job with that. You show proof of concept. If Frank Cignetti does that in Indiana, then you can start hammering the high school recruiting too. And then you can still use the portal to supplement where you're deficient at certain areas, but you've got to get that high school recruiting flowing a little bit. You've got to start taking from Cincinnati's school, competing with them, go to Cincinnati, like the general Cincinnati area and Ohio area, and because there's a bunch of good high schools up there, like St. Xavier and all that stuff, and try to get some of those recruits, right? Pull from as many as, any of those guys that you can't find, and then also continue to hit Florida as hard as you can, because if you're, especially with an NIL package, a lot of these kids would be willing to go, especially if you can find kids, although maybe they're not huge, targets of the big 3 or 4 if UCF actually gets their act together and gets it going. But you can still find speed, right?
Yep.
So a school like Appalachian State, how they pulled off an upset against Michigan is they just recruited the hell out of speed, because you know what? You can't teach its speed.
No,
and
you can't.
If I have a guy who might be 5'9", but he's hella fast, that can still play. And so you get some of those guys, you increase the speed that you have, and then you kind of have to run a little bit of a funky system, which Cignetti already does there. So if he installs that properly, having something that makes it difficult for your opponent to prepare week in and week out when they have to play you, as opposed to the normal stuff, gives you a little bit of advantage on Saturdays. So those would be the areas that I would absolutely hit for that. So run kind of a little bit of a different, unique system offensively. And then, absolutely you have to amp up the recruiting, show proof of concept, and then hit the high school recruiting as well.
Yep. No, absolutely. You hit it right on there. He's had the job for 6 weeks. Indiana has never landed a 5-star recruit ever in the history of the program. Has never landed it
In football.
in football, of course. Yeah, you get multiple every year in basketball, but in football, 6 weeks into the job, he has a 5-star quarterback on campus. Right? That's pretty exciting.
I don't think you're going to sign him,
not a
but
chance
that
in
is
hell.
the fact that he's even showing up is it's good because who knows? You never know, right? And here's the other thing. Nowadays with the transfer portal, there is a prize for finishing second place sometimes.
Yep.
There used to be a saying where there's no prize for second place because once a kid signs with his favorite school, all those hours that you invested in recruiting him and all those resources that you invested in recruiting him, well, they're all lost. Well, nowadays, given the portal, if this 5-star goes and he gets stuck behind another 5-star or a 4-star beats him out, like if you look at Georgia, where they had back-to-back 3 years in a row, they signed a 5-star quarterback, right? They signed the kid from Washington. I'm blanking on his name. Then they signed Jake Fromm. Then they signed Justin Fields, right? And then Fromm wound up beating out Fields and beating out the other kid from Washington. And so it sent 2 5-star quarterbacks looking elsewhere because of the transfer portal. The transfer portal is a real thing. This 5-star recruit, he goes somewhere. Maybe he doesn't start right away. He's like, you know what? I really enjoyed Indiana. They can hook me up with an NIL package. I can go there. That's, being second place in recruiting isn't always the worst thing anymore.
No, not at all. 2 more questions I have, and then we can briefly hit on Ohio or Florida State. Have you watched more, less, or an equal amount of IU since we became friends for about a half a decade so far?
I think I've definitely watched more, especially IU football.
Yeah.
But also they've been better. So they signed a kid out of Tampa Bay Tech, and that made the football program a little bit better for a few years.
Yes, they did.
So
yes,
a little
they did.
homegrown boy there, visiting up into the Midwest, and then he went off and was really good some other places too.
There you go. Last question, just because, you are Florida State grad, but you live in SEC country. Whose stock is better right now? The Big Ten or the SEC?
I think based on the fact that you had, the national champion, I would give the edge to the Big Ten at this point. But I don't think that that's necessarily super, like, the 2 of those conferences are going to be going battle for a long time. I think that it wouldn't hurt.
Well, the SEC has been above the Big Ten for years. And if you asked that question 12 months ago, you would have been laughed at. Right.
Well, yeah, the SEC had dominated, but the Big Ten has gotten it in there. I think I would give slight edge to the Big Ten right now, coming off the national championship and adding the programs that they're about to add. But the SEC is also adding some good programs, right? They're adding Texas and Oklahoma, who've got some pretty damn good pedigree of football themselves, as well as chances to compete for national championships in the future. So you're adding 4, which I think gets you, 4 quality programs, whereas they're only adding 2. But I think that puts you guys pretty damn close to even footing in terms of schools that we realistically think could win a national champion and schools that will compete for the playoff. So
speaking of schools competing for a national championship and a spot in the playoff, let's jump to Florida State. Sure. And I think the biggest question, at least on an IU Big Ten pod, is could Florida State soon be a part of the Big Ten?
I think it's actually that's the landing spot, in my opinion. Florida has not or does not want to allow Florida State into the SEC. And I also think that Florida State kind of would much prefer kind of embracing what is the Big Ten and being a little bit of a rival and having that extra footprint there down in SEC country. The Big Ten doesn't stretch to the SEC area realistically, and this would give them a heavy brand footing in that area. Let's be realistic. Florida State is one of the top brands in all of college football. They just are. When they're on TV, national TV, they're on it every year. They're going to have the first 2 games of the season, Florida State, everyone's going to be watching them. They're playing at Georgia Tech. They're playing against Georgia Tech in Dublin, week 0. All eyes will be on that game. And then they're playing Monday night against Boston College, Labor Day weekend. All eyes are going to be on that game. Why? Because they're Florida State and they draw eyeballs. Then you look at some other games that they're going to play throughout the course of the year. They're going to, they're definitely going to have some more Miami, Florida, Clemson, all the big ones. And then we'll see what else happens kind of in terms of the other games that they play. But they're a valuable property. So for the Big Ten conference, if you're going to continue to compete with the SEC and Florida State's going to get out of this contract with the ACC, they've got to be a target for you, because the amount of footprint increase that you're going to generate out of getting a school like Florida State. And then even if think about the other schools that are probably valuable commodities in the ACC. Miami is not quite as good as Florida State. They don't have nearly the alumni that Florida State has. You look at Clemson and you're like, well, I mean, is Clemson a valuable property, or are they kind of a property that's only had an uptick now and is going to fall back down to earth, and they've already kind of started to do? Then you look at a school like UNC. Yes, that's valuable in terms of basketball, but is it valuable in terms of football? Not as much. So, I mean, if you're looking from a football's perspective, and football, let's be realistic, as much as college basketball is, great and everyone loves it, and it draws tons of viewers and viewership and eyeballs, especially come tournament season in March, it does not hold the candle to college football in terms of ratings and driving revenue. So if we're looking at the most valuable property in all of the ACC in terms of driving eyeballs, I definitely think it's Florida State. So Florida State should be a target, and I think that the Big Ten makes the most sense for them.
Now, so let's just talk high level, right? Because a lot of people ask this when USC and Oregon isn't the path to a national championship, like, didn't you just create yourself a more difficult schedule? Couldn't Florida State stay in the ACC, win it every year, and get yourself in the top 12?
Yes, but there is a lot of things that factor into that, right? So for one, we've talked about it a lot. Money matters, right? If you're a school and you belong to one of those two conferences right now, the SEC and the Big Ten, you're generating a lot more revenue because of what the contracts that you have laid out for you. Florida State is falling behind in that respect. Rutgers is generating more revenue from their football entity than Florida State is, because of purely the fact that they're in the Big Ten. Rutgers football. Yeah, that's not okay from Florida State's perspective. In order to compete for national championships with the likes of, the Ohio States and the Michigans and the Alabamas and the LSUs and the USCs and the Oregons and all those schools that are doing it at the highest level, Florida State consistently, in order to compete at that level, has to get themselves into a power conference. Will you take maybe a few more losses regular season? Sure. But if I'm Florida State playing in one of those, it's going to allow my ability to recruit is going to be better. And then it's still Florida State. They have advantages geographically that a lot of schools don't have. They're really close to the southern area of Georgia, which they hammer, and they've been hammering under Mike Norvell. They have the entire state of Florida that they can pull from, including Miami. With Alabama, losing Nick Saban, that may, lessen the hold that Alabama has on a lot of that, because when Florida and Miami were in their heydays in the 90s, they were, nobody else was going into Florida recruiting. Now everyone is going into Florida and recruiting, but the biggest stars have been going to Ohio State and Alabama for the last 10 years or so, right? And Georgia. Now, if Florida State, being in the Big Ten or the SEC, is able to keep more of those guys home, that's one, going to pull from those teams, right? The Ohio States and Alabamas. And then two, it's just going to level up what you're able to do on the field. The other thing is for Florida State fans, if you want, buy-in from the fanhood, and you have games against Wake Forest, okay, I can drive there, I guess, but who cares? Am I really interested in going to sleepy Wake Forest for a football game? Or would I rather go somewhere in the Big Ten, or or the SEC,
Camp Randall, or over to Carver Hawkeye, or right. I mean, it's it
would make a lot of those more fun. And then the other thing is the programs in those conferences are investing more money into sports and football. Wake Forest doesn't give a fuck if they're good at football realistically from a monetary aspect. They just don't. They don't invest in the property. They don't invest in the school. The other schools in the Big Ten, that's why they're, also rans in the college football world. Florida State does not want to be an also ran. They want to be a player at the table. And in order to do so, they have to go to a big time school. And here's the thing. You could argue that there's a good chance that we don't see another undefeated national champion for a long time with the 12-team playoff. It's very likely, because the thing is, now that there is 12 teams that can get in, you don't have to always schedule cupcakes. You could actually schedule some of these more valuable properties for your out-of-conference games, knowing if you take a loss, it still may not kill you, and you can still get into the playoff, and it may make your team better, even if you take a loss there. We've seen teams in the NFL lose games and then use that information to go on and win Super Bowls, right? Like we saw the Bucs get absolutely blown the doors off of them by Patrick Mahomes and Tyreek Hill in Kansas City when they came down to Tampa. And then when they went and played in the Super Bowl, it was a different animal because they had the knowledge of having played them before, what they were going to do game plan wise and how they could slow it down.
That is what I think is the best thing about the 12-team playoff is exactly what you just said. Teams are going to have to prep themselves, especially if they think they're going to be playing them later on in the season.
Yeah,
for sure. I think that's huge. Last question I want to ask you on Florida State before we jump to our promo here. You said SEC is probably going to do everything in their power. And we know who in the SEC is trying to do everything in their power to block them. If you had to choose Newman, you had 3 wishes, and one of the wish was to get Florida State into a conference. Would you choose the SEC or the Big Ten?
I'd probably lean Big Ten at this point, but it's not, it would be fun for me also to go to the bunch of the SEC schools and have opportunities to tailgate at all of their campuses. So it wouldn't be bad either way, but I would probably pick the Big Ten right now at this point because it's kind of nice to be able to stick it to Florida from the other conference and the SEC.
Mm-hmm.
That would be fun on my part.
Yep. Awesome. Speaking of doing their part, let's get to our promo, which all of our listeners know is Mo Non-Track Club, our sponsor. MTC is Indiana's running brand, built on a deep love for the sport and the Hoosier State. They craft products, tell stories, and create experiences that aim to celebrate, support, and add to Indiana's running culture. It is freezing, people. It is absolutely freezing outside. None of you are outside running. But what you can do to get ready for the season is use our 10% code, which is LEO10 at checkout to get their sick gear, from shirts to hoodies to koozies, everything you need to get prepared for running season. The link for that will be in the show notes. Now let's get back to everyone's favorite part of the show, Randos. And my first one, we will stick with college football. Newman, the college football game is coming out. How were you into the NCAA football games?
I enjoyed kind of the roster building of it all. The recruiting. I always like to I like to invest in a really good center. I think that was an underrated position. If you have a good center, that's definitely an important thing. They make a lot of the calls, their awareness, they set the tone of the offensive line. So and they often tended to be under recruited. So that was my point of hitting. But yeah, I enjoyed the roster building a lot for sure.
Yeah, and I'm excited for what they're going to do with recruiting. It sounds like NIL.
There's NIL packages involved.
It sounds like the recruiting is going to be souped up, which it was also my most fun thing. I love taking a Conference USA team or a MAC team and just making them into a powerhouse. That was my favorite part of the NCAA football games. But yeah, I haven't played video games in forever. I'm not really a video game guy. When that game comes out, I will be front and center of playing video games again. Let's shift a little bit to something we've talked a lot about in the most recent podcast is how transfer portal season never ends. Do you like that there is basically transfer portal in season, transfer portal after season, transfer portal after spring, and then transfer portal in summer? Do you like those 4 windows, or would you like to see a little bit more regulation in regards to the transfer portal?
I think for coaches, it would be useful if it was cut down a little bit.
Yeah.
They complain about, the lack of, having to recruit your own roster constantly and all this stuff. So I absolutely think that they would be more interested. But I think from a player's perspective, they should be allowed to move and choose to move. And I think that based on the semester system, I think that should be allowed. In terms of in-season transfer portal, really all you're seeing is guys that are either grad transfers or their coaches get fired. Those are what the stipulations are currently. So there's not as many people that are being affected by that. In terms of figuring out a way to push I think realistically what they need to do is do something with the high school recruiting, because high school recruiting and transfer portal season and bowl season and semester end all happening at the same time is really the biggest issue in terms of what's going on at the end of December and into January. And then in terms of the 30-day window after your coach either gets fired or leaves to take another job, I think that could probably be reduced down. I think that you could say that that's you have 5 days immediately after the coach gets fired or steps down, and then you have 5 days once they install the new coach, so that it's not open the whole time. Those would be beneficial to kind of reduce that a little bit. In general, I think 30 days is a lot. The kids don't need quite that much time to make their decision. They know if they're going to leave or not. But that being said, I do think that having the windows, they should be able to leave at the end of the semester. And I mean, it makes the most sense, right? So it's like, oh, if a kid didn't want to leave after, the fall semester, maybe they thought that they were going to have a chance to move up a little bit in the spring, and we'll see what happens after spring ball. And then after spring ball, they find out, oh, they recruited over me. They brought in a transfer portal guy, and my spot on the depth chart didn't change, or it went down. I want out now. I think they should be allowed to do that. Now, could you put a limitation on the kids entering the transfer portal from the same school? Say, hey, if you entered in the winter and you didn't leave, you're not allowed to enter in the spring. Maybe that might, make it a little bit easier for the coaches, but they get paid. So the kids are not getting paid by the schools. So as far as I'm concerned, the kids can, should have all the opportunities.
Free agency, baby. So I'm torn on the transfer portal.
You used to hate it. You used to hate it.
So here, on a personal level, I do hate it because I think it creates an unlevel playing field. But as someone who produces college football content year round, both with you and on this podcast, it does lead to constant discussion. So it feeds the content machine for what I do here. But I do personally hate it. Let's jump to the.
I think that there's a lot of advantages for the kids. It is good for the kids to have the ability to transfer. And I think that they're even doing away with the multiple time transfer rules.
They are.
So that creates a little bit more of a free agency. But if these kids have their name, image, and likeness, and, just like any other employee, even though they're not employees, which is probably what's going to happen to help, calm down some of that transferring, is when they actually make them employees. But, they can sign 1-year NIL deals and go, bounce around wherever they want, wherever there's an opportunity for them to make the most money in the NIL and have an opportunity to play. Because at the end of the day, kids want to play football. That's why they're signed up to do it, right?
Exactly.
And if they're not getting the opportunity to play, go somewhere where they can. And I think that you do see kids go up and down as they see fit in order to do that. Sometimes both, right? Like a kid might transfer down because he wasn't getting an opportunity at a bigger school, go to a smaller school, or like a Power 5 school or something from a Power 5 to a G5 school, go down a level, show that you're actually really good, and then a bigger school comes calling and says, hey, we'll take you and you can play right away here. So I think it works out best for the kids that way. And I think that sometimes even some of the smaller schools can afford and have taken advantage of that. If you look at your boy Frank Zanetti, he had a bunch of kids transferred down from bigger schools to his school, and that's how they got to have the success that they did. So it benefits everybody. And at this point, the kids are the ones who've been, the lack of beneficiaries for so long that it's about time.
So I do think you're spot on there. I wanted to go the entire pod without a actually, but his dad is Frank Cignetti and his son is Frank Cignetti. We got Curt Cignetti.
Oh, so whatever.
It is. You said it. I think this is the second or third time you said Frank, and I was like, I got to correct you on that one. Let's jump to the NFL. I know you do a pick 'em. You're really good at picks. Pick the Super Bowl. Who you got? Chiefs, 49ers.
What line are you going to give me?
I'm giving you no line. Giving you no line.
Just straight up, who I think is going to win the game straight up.
Yes.
I'm going to take the Niners. The reason I'm going to take the Niners is the same reason that the Ravens did not win the game. They did not run the ball. You had an opportunity against one of the worst rush defenses throughout the course of the season, and they ran the ball even well when they ran the ball. But I think that's where you can really get the Chiefs. So I expect the 49ers to do whatever they can to kind of limit Travis Kelce in terms of their defense against the Chiefs offense. I don't think the Chiefs are going to be able to run the ball all that effectively against the 49ers.
Unless they're playing Chase Young.
But I do expect the 49ers to be able to run the ball. I expect a lot of Christian McCaffrey kind of taking advantage, using some Deebo Samuel in the run game and pass game, and just all the weapons that they have. I think that they're kind of the better team at this respect. But like we've talked about earlier, quarterback can be the great equalizer. So we'll see what Patrick Mahomes has up his sleeve. I would not be surprised if the Chiefs win this game. They're really good. They're, obviously having already won 2 Super Bowls, and Andy Reid is, one of the greatest play callers of all time. But Kyle Shanahan's right there on the other side, and he's pretty damn good play caller himself. So I think that I'm going to lean 49ers here for this one.
Yeah, so I know we'll probably cover this next week, but I wanted to cover with you. For me, I'm going Chiefs because of 3 reasons. 2 of them are absolutely legit.
Patrick Mahomes.
Yeah, I mean, so I kind of look at three things. I look at who's got the better coach, advantage Chiefs. Who's got the
advantage Chiefs?
Who's got the better quarterback?
Chiefs.
And who has the better defense?
It's a push there.
It's a push there. So give me 2 out of the 3 with better quarterback, better coach. And I do think it's a coin flip game. So when I think you're really splitting hairs, that's why I'd go with the Chiefs. And then I do think this is everyone's swan song. I think Andy Reid retires.
I don't see that happening.
I think Travis Kelce retires, and then they have the power of Taylor Swift. I on this show have been a self proclaimed Swiftie. That's not going to stop. So you give me those 2 very legitimate reasons why I think they win the game. And then you have the power of Reed retiring, Kelce retiring, and the power of Swift. I think that's too much for the 49ers to overcome.
What is Andy Reid going to do when he retires?
That'd be awesome. I don't have his own show.
That guy wants to coach football. He's not retiring. Get out of here. Travis Kelce retiring. I think that's a higher probability. I think he's not retiring this year. I'm going to take the opposite side on that one because I think that it's more likely that Jason retires, and I don't necessarily know that they're going to retire at the same time. But as far as Travis is concerned, as long as he's got Big Red and Patrick Mahomes, there's no reason for him to stop playing unless he really feels like he can't. And I think, why can't he do another year like he just did this year? Also, I think that, he had suffered a knee injury before the season that held him out of week 1. Do you remember this? A lot of people kind of forgot about that, and they talked about, he doesn't have it anymore. Maybe it's just that that's kind of lingered for him. So get that cleaned up in the offseason, feel better come next year, and he could absolutely give you another all-pro season. So I don't think that we're done seeing the likes of Travis Kelce and Andy Reid on the sideline for the Chiefs.
I do. I think it's their swan song. I think everyone knows it. Also, no one knows how to lose.
Also, what if they
in
lose?
A big game like Shanahan?
If they lose, are they coming back?
If they lose, they're coming back.
Does that change? Yeah. Okay.
If they lose, they're both coming back. But if
right.
they win, I do think it could be a swan song situation. Last but not least, this is not a basketball pod, but you're a college basketball fan. I'm a college basketball fan. 2 questions. Are you with me that this is one of the worst talent we've seen in college basketball in a few years? Like it just seems like there's no great players and no great teams.
I mean, absolutely, I'm with you. If you look at it, they were, so in the NBA draft, they project forward from, the classes that they've had coming out of high school, et cetera, et cetera. This is seen as one of the worst drafts in, I don't know, the last 15, 20 years that we're seeing. A lot of that is the fact that there's just not a lot of great college players. We've seen some drafts where there's been a lot of great college players like the Paolo Banchero, Jabari Smith, Chet Holmgren, and then we've seen great international drafts, right, where you had Victor Wembanyama coming in and stuff like that. This year, there's just a dearth of talent across college basketball, and that's kind of allows for some chaos. So I'm sure the tournament time will be fun because who knows in terms of picking brackets and stuff. Yeah. But yeah, it's not been as fun of a season to watch in terms of, because there are no great
star
teams.
players.
Yeah.
They're all centers. If you think about it, I mean, you got Dickinson at Kansas.
Yeah.
You got Edey again at Purdue. You got Klingon at UConn. Like there's star power, but not star power in positions like wow positions.
Well, the other thing with the centers is a lot of those guys aren't necessarily going to even be able to play at the next level because it's not that style of game. The college game compared to the NBA game, especially at the center positions, is significantly different. And that's why you see a lot of guys who are talented centers in the college basketball world not even making rosters in the NBA.
Yeah, so, Oscar Schwebe, right? I mean, national player of the year, doesn't even get drafted.
But I think he's on a roster and he's been playing a little bit, but mostly a G League kind of guy because it's just not how centers played anymore. It's almost like I heard them talk about this before the season. There's a strong belief that Paolo Banchero, although he's a power forward right now, may eventually move to being a small ball center for the Magic, and that may be the Magic at their best once he fills out a little bit in a couple of years. So
look at a small. I mean, again, this is not a basketball pod. I know some of our listeners get annoyed we talk a little too much basketball, but Trayce Jackson-Davis, small ball 5, he has started a few games for Golden State. Why? He fits the perfect NBA. He's a rim runner. He's a high flyer. He's a blocking machine. He is what the modern day center is in the NBA. Is Trayce Jackson-Davis, is Paolo Banchero, right? I mean, Paolo Banchero's 10 times more talented than Trayce, but that kind of mold is what NBA teams are going towards at the center. But they're not going for the Klingons, for the Dickinsons, and the Edeys.
Dickinson may have a chance because he can shoot. But I don't think Zach Edey's going to play in the NBA very long.
No, not at all. All right, Newman, thank you so much for jumping on. Guys, you can hear him and I on the Memery every Saturday during the college football season. Everyone else, be sure to check out Hoosier Happy Hour Pod on Twitter and Threads at Happy Hour IUFB, and make sure to follow our partner, Big Banter Sports, for all the latest updates involving our podcast, as well as the other top-notch podcasts that cover all the other teams in this conference. Be sure to download, follow, rate, and review this pod and all of the other great pods on the Big Banter Network. Until next time, cheers, Newman.
It was fun. Have a good one.
See ya.